Hello everyone, and welcome to the brand new series on my channel, one that I've been very excited to start making, Berlin Noir. This series is going to be a Berlin-inspired city set in 1929, and with it I want to try and build and best show all the political and social intricacies of this time period during the Weimar Republic. I'm a bit of a history nerd myself, and this idea originally stemmed from me wanting to build a German or French city set either at the very end or immediately after World War I. I wanted to try and show, the conditions of Europe after the First World War. Destroyed cities, fields covered just in, massive artillery, mounds and holes. But I quickly realized and knew deep down that that was not going to be possible as much as I wanted to do it. The assets simply aren't there on the workshop, so I sadly threw that idea aside, and that was actually sometime before I started this channel. But once I started this channel and with my Las Skylines series about a couple weeks ago, from the point of me recording this video currently, I had another idea. This time to build a German city set in 1929, and that manifested into what you are seeing now on screen. So I chose Berlin and 1929 for several reasons. As I mentioned, at the start of the video, I wanted to show the very interesting things going on during the interwar periods of the Weimar Republic. I chose the year 1929 specifically because I didn't want to do anything in the 1930s. I just, given the following, 1933, the election then, I didn't want anything set in the 1930s to be kind of put in with late 1930s Berlin. So I went with 1929 to go with same time period, same feel, but I guess a little safer given the events of the 1930s Germany. But anyways, so this is going to be a Berlin inspired city. I'm not going to copy it, partially because that would be extremely difficult to do considering that it's in 1929 Berlin and not a modern Berlin, so I can't use Google Earth to run around and look at the streets and the buildings that currently exist, because obviously that's not what existed in 1929. Plenty of things happened between then and now in Berlin, so I'm left with looking at pictures, mostly some videos too, but mostly pictures set during this time period. So like, for instance, I began with the Brandenburg Gate because it's obviously a very iconic structure in Berlin, and also because I found a good number of photos from late 1920s, early 1930s of this particular area. So I didn't copy even though there was a good number of photos, because I guess the general area is definitely probably like 75% or so copied, but still I got some little differences here and there. But yeah, so like this, I guess little, not courtyard, but this area here, set in 1929, was used by cars and people would drive through the Brandenburg Gate, unlike now it's pretty much just a national monument where tourists visit So like I'm placing some worn out decals to show where the cars would be driving, heading through the Brandenburg Gate and towards the Tiergarten on the other side. I thought this looked pretty decent with the worn out look, because in the images I used it was surprisingly worn down. Well, maybe not surprisingly, but understandably worn down, considering this was a fairly busy location back then with cars riding through. And I did, obviously, as you saw earlier, drag roads through the Brandenburg Gate, so cars do actually use it to drive through, which actually looks really cool, though you won't really see that in this episode because not enough buildings are placed on both sides for traffic to be going through it. But so anyways, here, this is one aspect that I did pretty much copy entirely with these large rectangular green patches. That was something I saw in every photo of this time period. I, in a second, will place a fountain on each right here, as you can see. So these green patches really, from what I saw in the photos, were only the fountains in the middle, and that's pretty much it. So I did add a little more just to make it look, I guess, better in-game, because I couldn't really just leave it blank like that, because that probably wouldn't have looked very nice, given that, yeah, you really have to add things maybe sometimes a little overboard from what you'd really see just to make it look good in this game. So I added these little fences around the green patches, and eventually in a sec some flower bushes around the fountain there, and ended up looking quite nice. So I didn't go too crazy in the end, although I do add some of these nice trees on both sides of the fountain, which I left for a tad bit of time, but eventually I did go back and remove those trees and just add the same tree only to the very corners of the grass. So that's a little bit later in the video, but I do, don't worry, eventually go back and fix it, because initially I was like, it looked alright, but I wanted to be as close to the real thing as possible. So I did leave some trees, but cut back so it wasn't completely just covered in the trees here. But so here it's about to pop up. I fixed the tram lines here in the beginning, because I did it that way because I didn't think I'd be able to actually run the nodes through the roads, because I figured that it would glitch out and I wouldn't be able to do it. But actually somehow it managed to be alright. There was a ton of, as you see on the tram roads or tram networks, a ton of poles, which I hated. So on a couple ones there, I used the network skins to remove the poles and wires. So right there, as you can see, just because it just didn't look right. So I experimented with using these wires here to just place down on my own, and so it didn't look as bad, because ideally I would not even use the vanilla assets for the tram poles, supports, and the wires, because it's probably a tad bit too modern. But considering that's a very small detail in the game compared to the what I'm trying to go for, I wasn't gonna completely do my own wires and supports for it, because that would just be really obnoxious for me to build in the long run, considering how many tram lines I plan on placing down in this game. But here I fix this just blank ugly wall and add some ivy, which took way longer than it should have. I cut out at least probably 2/3 of me actually trying to figure out how to place this without making sure it's the correct distance into the wall, but not sticking too far out, not sticking too much into the wall, which was seriously a pain. Yeah, I pretty much cut most of it out, but just left enough in there so you can see me adding some detail to the wall. I want to probably go back there and look for some assets on the workshop of some maybe old posters or images of this time period, maybe some signs too, whatever it may be, just to make it not so entirely plain, just a plain gray wall. But that'll be later, nothing in this video. But yeah, this building here is not found in Berlin, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's in Munich actually. But it looked good here. It's a very nice asset, and considering this is a focal point of the city, I wanted it to be a very nice asset placed here, so I went with this one here. But here I add some different textures for what it would be like a sidewalk. I go with these nice cobblestone decals, which I love the fact now that I'm building a European city for a change instead of what I've always done in this game, which has been pretty much Californian cities. I'm addicted to installing or downloading workshop assets, and I never thought of or knew about creating a separate Steam account to basically have another series running. I know Press, I believe, did an explanation of that in a video several months ago, so which obviously makes it possible to have multiple series going at once. But yeah, now that I'm building a European city, there's so many new assets to use and to experiment with, because I actually had several attempts of me building just the very beginning with the Brandenburg Gate and the buildings on the side, because I wanted to use the best assets possible to resemble the ones that are also there, and if I couldn't resemble it enough, use something that was plausibly could exist there. So I had to really scroll through a lot of the Rico ploppable or growable and the find it search, and that took some time. So even like I said, it took several attempts of me without recording, just to kind of get a feel of what I had available to build. And yeah, so once I had a feel of what was available and what buildings I could place where, I was able to record, because I didn't want to be scrolling through constantly in the video and then having to edit that out once I put it in the video editor. But yeah, so anyways, here as you can see, I got rid of all those trees in a line, just added the ones in the corner as I said I would do. I think that looks much better. Makes it much more open, which as it was in real life. So I'm glad I ended up with that. Here I just add a standard asphalt texture there, just to cover up the crosswalks, because I'm using the the road changer, color changer, I forget what the mod is called, but lets you remove crosswalks from different size roads, though it doesn't do it for everything. Or if you have a custom workshop roads, they don't work on that either, so you have to use either the ploppable asphalt or pavement or whatever to cover up those obviously unrealistic crosswalks for such a time period. But anyways, here I'm detailing the inside of this building. I really didn't know what to place. For much of the internal parts of the residential blocks, commercial blocks that I build, a little in this episode, but also in the next episode, I really don't have a good idea of what to place on the interior of the blocks, aside from just trees, really, and maybe some piles of trash. But since this is a nicer area of Berlin, I just wanted to go with trees, and I wasn't really sure what else to put in there, so we'll put trees. But in this area right here that I'm revisiting, I put some of the curbs down and added some flowers and put those little pillars there in the main walkway, which I suppose is kind of realistic. I'm not really sure. And I guess that brings me to another important point I have for this actually entire series, which is I've been to Germany once. I went to Munich several years ago. Wonderful city, but I really have no idea how European or German cities, the infrastructure, how they function, the buildings, what's realistic, what's not. And since I can't go off Google Earth, as I said, and I'm really only going off of photos, which are limited and also fairly poor quality, I really am going to rely on, hopefully, those of you who are German or anyone really in Europe who obviously will know much more about Berlin and the general architecture and the general feel that I want than a American. So I'm relying on you in the comments to let me know what I do wrong. Let me, give me some ideas. If something's, if it's a small change to something that's, inaccurate, then please let me know. I want to get it as accurate as possible without going, crazy. But if it's something that's, plausible but not necessarily 100% accurate, then, let me know. It's maybe something I could fix, but I'm really focused on the, the glaring, obvious wrongs that I may build in this game and need to fix. But, yeah, so that's to really not necessarily just Europeans or people who live in Germany, but anyone who may know more than me on Berlin and just German architecture and city design in general. But here, down this nice avenue, I was able to find some nice photos of this on the internet, and really all it was, at least that I could see, was just a nice 2 rows of fairly large trees down the avenue, which looked really nice in real life, and so I just figured that was something very simple that I would obviously do, since it was what I saw in photos from 1929. So just copying 2 rows of these nice new trees on both sides. I really like using these new trees that I've found in the workshop that are much different from just the standard Californian cities or California trees that I usually use, West Coast, whatever it may be, because those can be quite bland, especially plopping them down all the time. So I get a bigger, much more of a variety in European city, it seems. But anyway, so here I finally start plopping down some residential, commercial office blocks, whatever it may be, and still definitely getting a feel of what's available for me to use. And I wanted to use the highest density here, though I didn't entirely like those corner buildings there. I would have liked to have gone with taller ones, but at least from what I'm aware of, I'm definitely limited in the number of high density buildings of these kind to plop down, like in the, I guess, around this area, which is what I saw in the photos. But here is, so as I explained earlier, I wasn't really sure of what to do in the internal parts of the blocks, aside from just placing down trees, which, don't get me wrong, it looks fine. I know that's definitely something that is realistic, but it just feels kind of lazy to do that on every single block that I end up placing. So I guess to start, that's one thing to, shoot me your ideas in the comments of what to place down in the middle. My only ideas for once I get out of this nicer area of Berlin and once I get more towards I guess the slums of the city, I can start placing down clotheslines, hanging between tree or buildings and all that. But for now, in the nicer part of the city, let me know, because I want to make it look nice. But anyways, we are approaching the end of the video. Not too many cinematics to follow, but I hope you enjoyed, and let me know what you think.